Hi, everyone. Welcome onto the Nutrition Unpacked podcast. Today, I am your single host, Chantal, and we're possibly having Brenda joining in a little while, but we have a fantastic guest on today, Dr. Allan Desmond, who is an amazing gastroenterologist based in the UK, as well as an author, and also fun to talk to because he does a lot of cool projects, especially with food. So welcome, Dr. Desmond.
Hi Chantal, thank you so much for inviting me to Nutrition Unpacked. I can't wait to bust some fiber myths.
I know, it is incredible how online things are flying all over the place about what fiber does and doesn't do. Mostly what doesn't do, or actually what does, but and it's all inaccurate, especially when it comes to, it's like a polar opposite group of people that think that fiber is harming us, which is absolutely crazy. Now, before we go into that though, I'd love for you to give a little introduction about your work to people that perhaps haven't come across you. You are one of the very few vegan gastroenterologists who are out there and really embracing the lifestyle. You worked with the Happy Pair on books and educational material, which was really fun. And I see you embrace the lifestyle, which is actually fantastic to see because we love doctors understanding the science, but also the ethics and bringing them together for a very sustainable future. So yeah, give us a little intro about your work.
Oh, that's really kind. Well, I'm a consultant gastroenterologist, so I graduated from medical school back in 2001, having gone into medical school in 1995. So I've been studying medicine and practicing medicine for 30 years. Which is mind-boggling to me right now. So for a significantly more than half of my entire lifetime, I've been studying and practicing medicine. Very early on in my career, Chantal, when I decided to become a gastroenterologist to focus on gut health, I realized that very early on that almost every patient with a gut health problem would very quickly and directly make the connection to food. So they would ask me, I remember this 25 years ago, they would ask me, or maybe 20 years ago, what about food, doctor? Is there any food I can eat, any food I can avoid that can help me to improve my outlook? So these would be patients living with things like Crohn's disease, colitis, diverticular disease, precancerous colon polyps, fatty liver disease, gallstones, gastroesophageal reflux disease, all of the gastrointestinal conditions, which are so very common in the 21st century that we almost take them for granted. But in seeking answers, I felt responsibility, right? When my patient asks that question, I feel responsibility to give them an evidence-based answer. So very early on in my career, I had my eyes open for those studies. So in the same medical journals where I would see about the latest study on the latest medication or the latest endoscopic technique or the latest innovations in medicine and gastroenterology, I would always pay special attention to these studies giving evidence-based answers to that question. What effect does food really have on our digestive health? What effect does the food that we eat have on our outlook when we've been diagnosed with one of these chronic digestive health problems? And the more I read, and this took a long time, but the more I read, the more it became obvious that there was two factors here. Number one was leaning into whole foods. So pushing back against the highly ultra-processed standard Western diet, pushing back against a situation where 65% of our calories now come in ultra-processed form, something the human gut microbiome never had to deal with up to about a century ago. So pushing it back against ultra-processed foods, leaning to whole foods, but also choosing to get our nutrition from plants first. And a wide variety of plants, whole foods, plant-based. So those four words really do sum up a diet that ticks every box when it comes to protecting and repairing and safeguarding our digestive health and our overall health. So as a doctor, I've become very passionate about spreading that word, letting people know about it, that the more whole food plant-based meals that we can build into our day, into our week, the better for our gut health, the better for our long-term health. And it turns out, Chantal, that all of these conditions, just like the other diseases that we recognize as being linked to our standard global diet and lifestyles, the heart diseases and the type 2 diabetes and the various cancers, it turns out that many of these chronic digestive health problems could be prevented by pushing back hard on the standard Western diet and lifestyle, for sure. So that's led me to be an author, a podcaster. It's led me to spend a little bit of time on social media, which for all of its downsides is still an incredible resource and an incredible tool for sharing evidence-based diet and lifestyle advice. So,
Absolutely.
So it's led me to Instagram, it's led me to podcasts, having my own podcast. I wrote a book a few years ago. My second book is out now. It will be it's available to pre-order now. What Your Doctor Isn't Telling You About Food. It's out on June 18th. So super busy. Making sure the world knows about that book at the moment. So yeah, that's me. That's me in a nutshell. That's me in a nutshell, Chantal.
Amazing. I mean, I know there is a lot more to you than this, but amazing. I also want to just say, let's start with I love the title of your book, because when you were talking about the common diseases that we have with just in gastroenterology alone, one of the myths that we hear from doctors is that if people have Crohn's disease, for example, they should avoid fiber, which I think is really parallel to this carnivore approach of lifestyle and the claims that they make as well. So we can start from there, fiber being deterrent for our gut health.
Yeah, well, fiber is an incredibly important determinant for our gut health. You know, there's this ancient phrase in medicine from Hippocrates 2,500 years ago: all disease begins in the gut. Or if we want to give it a bit more of a positive spin, all health begins in the gut. Now, Hippocrates didn't invent that concept. This was also a concept that ran straight through Ayurvedic medicine for centuries beforehand. The concept of Agni, this kind of inner fire, also present in traditional Chinese medicine, the middle burner. So whatever tradition you look at, the concept that in order to be healthy, you need to have a healthy gut has been long recognized intuitively. Now, we recognize in the 21st century that there's so much truth in all of that ancient wisdom, because whether it's preventing the diseases that fill our gastrointestinal wards, such as colorectal cancer, diverticular disease, fatty liver disease, so whether it's preventing those, whether it's improving the outlook of those diseases, whether it's taking care of our gut microbiome, the trillions of microbes that live in our gut that help us, if we treat them right, we feed them right, that help us to control our blood sugars, reduce chronic inflammation, that help us to maintain a healthy body weight, help to protect our cognitive health. Whether we're looking at any of those, dietary fiber is so important. Now, we first learned about the importance of dietary fiber more than 50 years ago. One of my professional heroes, Dr. Dennis Burkitt, in 1973, published a landmark paper in the British Medical Journal, which was called Some Diseases Characteristic of Western Civilization. Now, Dr. Burkitt trained in Dublin, worked in the UK, but spent many years working in Uganda, Kampala, Uganda. And he noticed, Chantal, that when he was working as a surgeon in Kampala, Uganda, sure, people there in the 1970s had huge health challenges, but he didn't have to get out of his bed at night to deal with complications of gallstones, diverticular disease, colorectal cancer, ulcerative colitis, or Crohn's disease. And his theory was that this was due to diminishing dietary fiber in the industrialized, westernized diet that was already becoming the norm back in the 1970s. He looked at people living in Kampala, Uganda, who were getting between maybe 50 to 80 grams of dietary fiber per day. And his theory, his fiber hypothesis, was that having enough dietary fiber in your system wasn't simply a scrubbing brush to keep everything moving, but this was actually an integral source of nutrition for a healthy gut. and even for a healthy gut microbiome and the bugs that live in our digestive system. This was in the 1970s, Chantal, before we even had the phrase microbiome. Dr. Burkett was talking about this. And since Dr. Burkett put the concept of fiber into the nutrition textbooks, his theory has been proven time and time and time again. So we know that people who get sufficient dietary fiber are substantially less likely to develop, you name it, diverticular disease, colorectal cancer, fatty liver disease, and then even type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and all the other conditions that we view as inevitable in the 21st century. But sadly, thanks in many ways to the kind of failure of public health and the failure of the food system, we know that 95% of people, 95% of adults in high-income countries are now consuming far less than even the minimum recommended 30 grams of dietary fiber per day. And that, Chantal, doesn't just make you constipated, which it can do. It also helps you to build a fiber deficient gut, which is a dysfunctional gut. Yeah. And when you add to that low fiber, the high meat, high fat, high processed food, high junk food approach to food that has now become the norm, not through individual choice or individual failure, through economic forces, you have got the perfect recipe for a dysfunctional gut and a dysfunctional gut microbiome, which dials you away from health and towards disease. And this concept, I mean, humans have had this incredibly versatile digestive system for thousands of years. It's one of the reasons we've been so successful as a species. Our digestive system, while it functions extremely well, maybe optimally on a healthy, fiber-diverse, plant-diverse diet, our digestive system can almost adapt to anything. And that's been one of the reasons we've been so successful as a race, as a species. But in the 21st century, our gut and our gut microbiomes have come up against the standard Western diet, probably the most formidable adversary our gut microbiome has ever seen. And yes, a big part of that is the innate fiber deficiency that comes with that.
Yeah. So another claim that segues perfect with this is, and this is what the carnivores are sharing online, is that fiber is not essential. It has zero nutritional value because we don't digest it.
Well, that's the that is a claim that can only be made by someone who stopped reading nutritional science 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Because it completely neglects the concept of, well, first of all the epidemiology that we have around why fiber, adequate dietary fiber is so good for us in terms of our heart health, our longevity, our well-being, reduced risk of type 2 diabetes. But you know, Chantal, when you eat a fiber-rich and fiber-diverse diet, the fact that your human your enzymes, your digestive enzymes, which are incredible, and will take whatever you eat and will get the protein and the carbohydrates and the fats and the vitamins and the minerals and the iron and the magnesium and all of those important building blocks that a human body needs, and extract them and allow you to absorb them into your system. So then they become building blocks for your human body and fuel your metabolism and well-being. The fact that those same enzymes cannot digest many types of dietary fiber and cannot digest resistant starch and cannot digest many of the polyphenols that we get from plants. This is a superpower. This is a good thing, because those compounds then arrive at the large bowel, the home of the human gut microbiome, which thrives on these compounds, which breaks the resistant starch and the fiber and the polyphenols down. Those particular substances from plants feed the beneficial bacteria. Those beneficial bacteria break them down and then produce postbiotic compounds, many of them, but probably the most important being short-chain fatty acids like butyrate and propionate. These short-chain fatty acids, which, just to remind the carnivores, have been produced by this fiber-fueled, plant-fueled gut microbiome, not only do they produce 70% of the energy needed by the cells lining our large bowel, they also enter our bloodstream and help to reduce chronic inflammation. They have, through GLP-1 and peptide YY, they help to control our appetite and let us know when we've had enough food. For many millennia, that was important for humans, that they knew they'd finally gotten enough food. In the 21st century, it's a warning sign. Slow down. You've gotten enough food. You can stop now.
Yeah.
So here, I'll give you an example, okay? So I remember reading a study a few years ago showing that scientists had found butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid, in our cerebrospinal fluid. So this is a compound, a substance, that is made preferentially by your gut microbiome when you eat a fiber-rich plant-predominant diet. That's how you optimize your production of butyrate. It's in our cerebrospinal fluid. So I was speaking to my friend Dean Sherzai, the wonderful neurologist, and I said, Dean, what is butyrate doing in my cerebrospinal fluid? And he said, well, the science suggests that it helps to maintain the integrity of the blood-brain barrier. So the blood-brain barrier being an incredibly important physiological system that helps to prevent toxins entering your brain. So that stuff protecting your brain, preferentially made by your gut microbiome when you eat plants. Come on, carnivores. You got to read some more science. You got to read some more science. Plants aren't optional. They're optimal.
Yes, thank you. I want to just mention that our beautiful Brenda joined us. Hi, Brenda. Welcome.
Hi. Hello, Chantal, and hello, Alan. It's just wonderful to see you.
So lovely to see you, and I'm glad you've been doing chores as well, because immediately before we came on, I was doing yard work. So I rushed in, had a quick shower and a shave, nipped my chin here, as you can see.
Oh, no.
And I've got a little plaster on here so I don't exsanguinate on screen. But it's so lovely to see you. It's so lovely, really lovely to see you.
Really lovely to see you again. And I was so excited about having you on the show, and I can't believe I got my days mixed up. And
we started already with some of the myths, and actually I love Dr. Desmond is being great because you are segueing into like the next question and claim that they make. So we just talked about short chain fatty acids, and one of the claims that the carnivore makes is that carnivore provides short chain fatty acids without the fiber.
Your gut microbiome, your entire digestive system, as we mentioned earlier, is incredibly adaptive. Incredibly adaptive. And for most of human history, Chantal and Brenda, as you know, humans, our only goal really was to live maybe into our early 20s so that we could have children, pass on our genetics, maintain the safety of our small little group or tribe of people around us. So the food that we ate, the food that we sought out in those what must have been an incredibly difficult and even difficult to imagine world, was whatever was available. Animal, vegetable, root, tuber, seed, anything that we could possibly eat and digest was going to help improve our longevity in those incredibly difficult circumstances. And our incredible human gut can take almost any food and will get us by on that food, okay? Quick note to the people who say that humans shouldn't eat any vegetables. I presume when you're talking about carnivores, you're talking about the meat and salt people, okay?
And butter. So don't forget the butter.
Meat, butter, and salt. So when you first think about your food, what happens? You salivate, correct? That's a little signal that your digestive system is kicking in. It's not just saliva. Your digestive enzymes are starting as well. Your tummy then gurgles because peristalsis is happening. Your intestine is beginning to move and function. And that's your body getting ready to eat. That's why I always ask my patients to eat mindfully. it's so important for effective digestion. To borrow a phrase from the world of meditation, to eat and know you're eating is really, really important. But the very first enzyme that your food encounters in your mouth is salivary amylase, which breaks down starch. It doesn't break down meat, it doesn't break down fat, it breaks down starch, the very first enzyme. But as I was saying, when humans can get by on anything, and it is true that even if you eat an entirely fiber deficient diet, your gut microbiome will find a way to produce short chain fatty acids, and it will do this through proteolytic fermentation. We always talk about fermentation as being something that's exclusive to fiber, but it's not. There is an alternative pathway there, proteolytic fermentation. But the problem with proteolytic fermentation is that it's a far less efficient way to produce short-chain fatty acids. There's absolutely no doubt in the world of gut microbiome science that when we eat a fiber-rich, fiber-diverse, plant-diverse diet, we optimize we optimize short-chain fatty acid production. In fact, if you move from a standard Western diet to a high-fiber plant-based diet, the production of short-chain fatty acids goes up by 70% in a matter of 2 weeks. This happens quickly. But if you're eating a fiber, I haven't seen any specific studies on a meat-exclusive carnivore-only diet because, as you know, there are very few studies on that incredibly unhealthy way of eating. Probably because researchers feel it would be unethical to put someone on that mode of eating. But I haven't seen any studies specifically looking at the carnivore diet and how low that brings butyrate production. But we did the other concern about harnessing proteolytic fermentation is that the postbiotic products that are produced by that process are almost universally harmful to our overall health and are helping. So beyond the effects that you're getting of all that saturated fat, cholesterol, and animal protein, beyond the negative effects you're getting by missing out on the polyphenols, the vitamins and minerals that we get from healthy plant-based eating, all the antioxidants, the phytonutrients, the resveratrol, the carotenoids, all of these wonderful substances, the phytochemicals, the clues in the name phyto, plant, phytochemicals. Beyond the benefit of losing out on all of those benefits, you're also tilting your gut microbiome towards proteolytic fermentation. So you're feeding harmful bacteria. And why are they harmful? Because they generate harmful postbiotic substances, including trimethylamine, hydrogen sulfide gas. These substances in excess help to tilt our gut microbiome towards poorer health, carcinogenesis, chronic inflammation. So bad, just bad across the board, really. But like we pointed out earlier, it seems that the carnivore enthusiasts, the people who promote this mode of eating, stopped reading nutrition science 50 or 60 years ago, or even worse than that, they've never read any nutrition science apart from the occasional abstract that supports their fundamental belief that a meat-only diet is better for humans. But interestingly, and I'm sure you've seen examples of this, when the individuals who really promote this engage or speak with someone who knows a little bit more about nutritional science, has a broad understanding about nutritional science, usually their claims seem to be quite flimsy, based on anecdote, personal experience, rather than the wealth of evidence. I mean, we've just seen, in late 2025, we saw the Eat Lancet report published. 2025, the second version of the Eat Lancet publication, the most in-depth and comprehensive inquiry into answering that same question that my patients asked me 20 years ago, never stopped asking me, what should I eat, doctor? What should I eat for better health? Not just you and me and Brenda, but everybody, all 8 billion humans on the planet. What should we ask our food system to feed us for optimal health, optimal gut health, optimal longevity? And they came in their first report back in 2019, their second report in 2025. I was there attending virtually the launch of that incredibly important report. A healthy diet consists predominantly of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, and plant-derived oils, with small amounts of optional animal-based foods if required, or if preferred. Okay, but again, in much smaller amounts than people may be used to. So we're talking about fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds. We're talking about meat. We're talking about poultry, maybe 30 to 60 grams per day as an option. Fish, 30 to 60 grams per day as an option. Red meat, 7 to 14, that's 14 grams per day as an option. Eggs, 2 to 3 eggs per week as an option. Okay, and the Eat Lancet authors being very, very clear that if we could have a food system that could help everybody to eat like this, and that's no small request, but that would be a huge and fundamental shift in our food system globally, that it would prevent more than 15 million unnecessary human deaths every single year by preventing so many cases of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and various cancers. And that it would probably keep maybe 200 million people healthy, happy, productive, at home with their families, in the workplace, enjoying their lives, rather than spending years struggling with chronic poor health, illness, and disability. Now, the amounts of meat that are included in that evidence-based, like I said, one of probably the most intensive, extensive, detailed inquiries into the evidence around human health and longevity and food that's ever been published, the amounts of animal products that they included as optional per week is what the carnivore advocates are telling us to eat for breakfast every single day. I've just we see a lot of this emanating from the United States, of course. I remember being at a talk by a British journalist a number of years ago, a chap called Mark Sopel. He was at the time he was the BBC's American correspondent, and he'd written a book all about U.S. politics, and this was around the time of the first Trump administration, and he had called the book "If Only They Didn't Speak English," and the concept being that if U.S. politicians didn't speak English on this side of the pond, we wouldn't follow their politics so closely.
Yeah.
And I think if only they didn't speak English. So if the US-based carnivores didn't speak English, maybe those of us who speak English wouldn't follow their nonsense so closely. But we've just seen the US Secretary for Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a gentleman with a decades-long history of distorting and mistrusting and misrepresenting science, discussing publicly how he eats a carnivore diet. He had steak and yogurt for breakfast, he was proudly telling us just this week.
Yes, and Alan, I just have to add something in. He was really at the helm of the new dietary guidelines for Americans. And not surprisingly, we have this inverted pyramid with, a big marbled steak at the very top, ground beef, a piece of cheese above that, big, huge poultry, and of course butter, and they're recommending, as healthy fats, things like butter and beef tallow. And I'm very curious, your impression of all of this, how we had the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee's wonderful 400 plus page report that was virtually ignored, and these new guidelines that are just very much promoting high-fat dairy and red meat.
Well, meanwhile, here on this side of the pond, governments are taking a completely different approach. So, we've just had the new dietary guidelines in the Netherlands, just published, in the last few weeks. pushing towards plant-based. Plant-based food is on the agenda, advising that people eat, I think that at a maximum of 300 grams of meat per week, and that a maximum of 100 grams of that meat should be red meat. So that's kind of coming close to the Eat Lancet recommendations. Looks a lot like the Canadian dietary guidelines. We see...
Yes, and as a Canadian, I was very, very proud of our 2019 food guide and dietary guidelines. We went definitely in a very similar direction.
Of course, but of course you did, because you were following the science. And we've seen that in the Netherlands, in Germany, there's public funding now to move the food system so that the majority of protein comes from plants. Even in Germany, the dietary guidelines are telling people to cut down on processed meats significantly. So we're seeing that across Europe, and not just dietary guidelines, but also public funding and policy and legislation to support it. You've got the same situation in Canada. The Canadian dietary guidelines from 2019 are standouts, and are guidelines that I use all the time in my own clinic, actually, because they're incredibly helpful. And really, when you look at a dietary guideline that tells you to choose, when it comes to high protein foods, choose beans and legumes first, then choose high protein plant-based foods such as tofu, tempeh, and maybe seitan. Then, and only then, think about having some seafood. And then, your fourth choice for protein may be red meat, but in very small amounts. And the fifth choice, the choice you don't want to make, are the processed meats, the bacons and the sausages and the prosciutto, because we know that those are group 1 class group 1 carcinogens. They contribute very, very readily to the risk of colorectal cancer. We know that red meat is a class 2 carcinogen, probably causes cancer in humans, and that cancer is colorectal cancer. But Brenda, again, I said a moment ago, the whole concept, if only they didn't speak English, then we wouldn't pay so much attention to all the noise and that was around the recently published US dietary guidelines. But I must say, generally, and I'm sure you're aware of this yourself, that the international community has never really looked to the US dietary guidelines for evidence-based advice on how to instruct people on to eat healthily. We've known for decades, of course, that the primary authorship of the US dietary guidelines lies with the US Department of Agriculture, the USDA. And if you visit the USDA website, of course, their primary goal, which is fine, it's what they're set up to do, is to protect the interests of America's dairy producers and ranchers. And when we say the US dairy producers and ranchers, we're not talking about the individual farmhands who are out working 24/7, 365 in every weather, working as hard as they can to earn as much, to earn what is probably a relatively low hourly rate of pay. We're talking about the big corporations that control the food system, who have never been making more money, right? So the USDA has a huge hand in the US dietary guidelines. So they've never been that useful. They've never talked about health. They just talked about food and steak and eggs and dairy. So although there's been a lot, the way that the current US dietary guidelines were conceived and published, I've got a whole chapter on that in my new book, actually, and it's absolutely fascinating to go through that. I think for those of us who don't live in the United States, it's a really, really important reminder that the misinformation we see online every day doesn't just mislead the individuals who are consuming that content, that the influencers who build up an audience and influence through those media are now becoming genuine influencers. They're influencing the public conversation. They're influencing public policy. And if you allow them to proceed unchecked and you don't challenge them, before you know it, you've got a national dietary guideline that is more about position and politics and belief than it is about science. So the one reason I would highlight the current US dietary guidelines is as a warning to every other country, don't let this happen.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And when you look at the U.S. dietary guidelines, page 1 is the message from the secretaries, Robert F.K. and Brooke Rowlands. And one of the things that they state very clearly is their message is, to eat real food, and that they're realigning the food system to support American farmers, ranchers, and companies who grow and produce so-called real food. So it's actually kind of interesting to read the very short dietary guidelines, which are only 9 pages, and look at the rationale for the recommendations that they make. It's
Absolutely. I think we need to recognize when we look at that document that it was primarily produced by the US Department of Agriculture and people working very close with the US Secretary for Health and Human Services, who, as I said, has very clearly stated his own personal position and allowed his own personal position to significantly influence what ultimately appeared in that guideline. So as such, Brenda, I've seen a lot of people on podcasts, TV shows, newspapers, etc., saying the new US dietary guidelines, the good, the bad, and the ugly, or things like that. But honestly, I think even pretending that it's a science-based guidance to how to eat a healthy diet or how to feed a country healthy food is preposterous. It's not that at all. The advice given by the US Dietary Guidelines Committee, of which Professor Gardner was a member, that is certainly worth reading. That is absolutely fascinating. It's a very balanced review of the evidence around food. But it was just an advisory, and those advisories have often been discounted or ignored by the US Department of Agriculture, but never more have they been ignored or changed than in 2025, 2026. So the current US dietary guidelines with the red meat up on top, that is not a healthy way to build a healthy gut, that's for sure.
No, and I think it's also worth mentioning that the USDA and the HHS actually decided to discard or dismiss the DAG's report, but then they commissioned a hand-picked 9-member panel, 7 of the 9 of whom had very strong ties to the meat industry, to produce a new scientific foundation for the dietary guidelines for Americans. And the individuals actually were, as far as I understand, responsible for writing parts of the new guidelines. So this was, and what's interesting is the DGAC is a completely transparent, there's public meetings, open comment, whereas the 9-member panel, there was a complete lack of transparency. There was no public input, no systematic review as they did with the DGAC. So it was a very, very different process with the 9-member panel.
And even beyond that, the 9-member panel's recommendations were submitted to the DGA. So that 9-member panel still did not write the guidelines. There was another layer of editing, which becomes very clear when you see a guideline that's recommending butter and tallow and beef, but then within the text still says to keep your saturated fat to fewer than 10% your calories. So there's contraindications. It looks like someone's copied someone else's homework.
Oh, exactly. And it's fun if you try to actually create a 2,000 calorie diet that follows their guidelines. It's just impossible to create something that's less than 10% saturated fat.
But I would say to your viewers, please don't use that as a dietary guideline. Maybe look at the Canadian dietary guidelines or the new guidelines in the Netherlands, or look at any, I think the Canadian dietary guidelines are great too. So if you want to protect, preserve, and really work on having an excellent digestive system, a healthy gut microbiome that helps to dial your body towards health every day, build your meals around fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts and seeds, herbs and spices, healthy plant-derived oils. So you got your extra virgin olive oil, your flaxseed oils, your seed-derived oils, which can be used in small amounts to help make food more flavorful, help your body to absorb those fat-soluble vitamins. And look, if you also would like to have some meat, poultry in there, sure, that's fine. But as we covered earlier in the conversation, at much smaller amounts than we've become habituated to in countries like the US, Canada, the UK, Ireland, and other high-income countries.
Definitely.
For sure.
Dr. Desmond, I know you have to go. You had a hard stop, and you're very busy and you made time for us. I just want to thank you so much for your time, and also remind everybody that they can pre-order your book, What Your Doctor Isn't Telling You About Food, and it will come out on June 18th. And we will put everything in the show notes so people can actually get it. And I would love to chat to you again. I'm sure Brenda as well. And so we'll be in touch, and maybe even do an episode about your book on my other podcast, if you wish. So
that would be lovely. That would be lovely. I feel terrible rushing off, but I do have to go. Brenda, absolute pleasure to see you. And,
I wish I could give you a hug, and I'm so grateful for all you're doing, your balance and your incredible intuition. Thank you so much for everything you're doing to make this world a healthier place.
Yeah.
Lovely to see you, Brenda. Will you be at ICNM this year in Washington, D.C.?
Not this year.
Okay,
at the cottage with the family.
Lovely. That's probably more important. Good to see you both.
You too.
Hi, Dr. Desmond. Thank you. Brenda, I think you can actually take the baton on some of the questions, maybe, because as a dietitian, you can truly, allow some guidance from the things that we see online.
Yeah, I was so excited about this, with Alan. I just can't believe I did that, and kind of, when you're not. I just was losing track of what day it was, and I don't know how I did that, but anyway,
we are human.
I apologize. No, I just feel so badly.
Don't feel bad. Honestly, I'm even gonna leave this in the podcast because I feel like we have to show people we are human, and we're very busy, and we're really trying to do something with very busy schedules to help humanity get healthier, to make sure people are clearer about information. And that means making a sacrifice. I mean, it's 7 o'clock here. It's just turning 8 o'clock your time. You wake up super early to also fit this in. And so, people will be very gracious about the fact that you were late. You showed up. That's all that matters, and and now we can just actually go through a couple of the claims that I know you can answer as well, because they're important. There is one that goes around a lot, which is why people actually move to the carnivore diet, which talks about fiber actually giving bloating and causing inflammation inherently, so that it should be avoided, because the fiber feeds bacteria that causes gas and inflammation. So what do we say when we want to challenge this common belief? And again, as Dr. Desmond was saying earlier, from people that haven't actually studied, but the followers of these speakers or these influencers are like a cult, right? Because their cult leader is telling them something, so they will defend that with teeth and nails, because maybe they were feeling the bloating and the gas, and it did go away going on to this elimination diet. So how do we actually make them understand the difference between this being optimal diet, or maybe being a moment where you have to take to actually understand what's happening with your gut?
Yeah, I mean, and there's no question that especially when you have an unhealthy gut microbiome, and it's not habituated to being exposed to sufficient fiber, you can have that kind of response where you get a lot of gas and bloating when you eat fiber. But our gut microbiome changes as we change what we eat, and adjusts, and is very, those symptoms tend to diminish as we increase gradually the fiber in our diet. And what people have to remember is that the foods that contain fiber are also the foods that contain antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds and have the highest nutrient density of all foods. So, the greatest supply of micronutrients, and they're plant sterols and all of these compounds that can be that are highly protective to human health. And what we see, if you look around the world, is the people that are eating higher fiber diets tend to live longer. They tend to have lower rates of chronic disease. If you look at the blue zones, they all consume relatively high fiber diets. It's not a coincidence that they do. When we expose our gut microbiome to fiber, we're feeding the bacteria that can produce butyrate and these wonderful short chain fatty acids. We're fortifying the gut microbiome in a way that will not only support gut health, but will support the health of every body system, including the brain, as Dr. Desmond was saying. And I think that's what people need to realize. And when we consume foods that have no fiber as being the predominant foods, certainly humans are adaptable and we can manage having some animal products in the diet and still do reasonably well when the bulk of what we eat is whole plant foods. But when we remove completely those whole plant foods, as carnivores do, we're really realigning the system in a way that it's so destructive, because that gut microbiome, which 30 years ago we didn't even really realize what kind of impact it had on all of the other body systems, we now realize is absolutely vital to human health. And we're undermining that system and that gut microbiome. And the carnivore diet is something that has fairly recently become popular. And my fear is in time, we're going to see a lot of the long-term negative consequences of this way of eating. And I think we'll see them in increased risk of cancers, especially colorectal cancers, but other cancers as well. We'll see an increased risk of cardiovascular disease because we're reducing nitric oxide production. We're harming the endothelium. We're increasing atherosclerosis. We're doing all sorts of things. We're having such a negative impact on all of these systems that are so vital to the way that we function in daily life.
Absolutely. I was trying to find, there is a study that has been shared, but I need to find it. I don't have it here. I was trying to find it quickly. That talks about the medium-term effects of carnivore diets, actually, and shows that it's not beneficial. And so that is already something that we are seeing. It's the first one. It's a meta-analysis, so it's pretty valuable. And there is more that needs to be done. And of course, this is a pretty new phenomenon, so we need to probably wait a few years to see a better result, or more. But at the same time, we have a good guidance here. But I think also by default, by understanding how the gut actually works and how the microbiome works, that the opposite is true as well. And I think when it comes to people understanding of this approach that, oh, well, we are better without fiber, or that fiber is poisonous for us because it's full of anti-nutrients. It's the lack of understanding of how the microbiome works, but also where you are at with your gut right now is just an indication that you're not healthy. Removing the fiber for you not to have gas and not to have inflammation, which actually it's only temporary, because you're going to get a long-term inflammation by not having fiber, because your microbiome is not going to thrive. You are just showing that your microbiome is in dysbiosis, meaning you're not balanced. You don't have a good balance between the good gut bacteria and the bad gut bacteria. So what is needed here is a gastroenterologist, a dietitian that can guide you through perhaps a FODMAP diet approach at the beginning, or perhaps just understanding how you're doing this elimination diet, which it is an elimination diet to go on carnivore, and then slowly start adding in the food that long term will provide you with health and longevity, because it's about rehabilitating. I love when Dr. Boltzowitz always says, your gut is a muscle, and if you don't work muscles, you lose the muscle. So you have to work it.
Exactly. And I think that, we also need to realize, apart from the complete lack of fiber and the reduction in short chain fatty acid production and the, impairing the gut barrier function and microbial diversity and all of that, there are other huge issues with the carnivore diet. So, for example, vitamin C would be very low because meat and dairy don't have a lot of vitamin C. Folate, magnesium, potassium would be very low. So when we look at micronutrients, there are a lot of serious potential shortfalls. Of course, there's a complete absence of phytochemicals like, polyphenols and carotenoids and all of these things that we know are super protective. And then, the other thing is when we remove, carbohydrates and fiber, we're relying on diets that are very high in saturated fat, which increases ApoB and LDL cholesterol. And there are all of these things to consider. There are also some issues with sort of, acid balance, and, a high animal protein diets have a high dietary acid load. They can affect calcium balance and bone health. And of course, you're looking at things like constipation and, over the long term. And so just all sorts of potential negative outcomes. And so I think people need to recognize that, remember, you might be aware of this, the best diet, the US News does this best diet evaluation on an annual basis, and almost every year the very low carb diets like keto diets come in sort of last place or close to last place for nutritional adequacy, because they're just so nutritionally deficient.
Well, I'm glad that the mainstream media is doing something right with that one. That's positive. And I like to plug in this before we end. It's that I feel it's really important to also listen when people speak, because we are bashing the vegans for taking supplements. But then we just mentioned how many deficiencies there are in a carnivore approach, and they all take supplements. So it's like, I don't understand. You're saying this is optimal diet where you don't get deficiencies, but you all have to take supplements. Like, the hypocrisy. It's so crazy.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is there way back, this, I guess, I think it was probably 2020 or 2021, there was a systematic review of 41 studies that compared nutritional adequacy of lacto-ovo, vegetarian, vegan, and omnivorous diets. And they identified the nutrients that were at risk of inadequacy and the nutrients that had favorably high intakes within each dietary pattern. Now, they didn't include a carnivore diet, but just a, kind of standard omnivorous diet. And what I found was very interesting was the number of nutrients for which there could be shortfalls was actually very similar in all of the dietary patterns. They were just different nutrients. So for vegans, for example, it was B12 and vitamin D and calcium and iodine and zinc and, EPA and DHA possibly. And for meat eaters, it was fiber and vitamin D and E and folate and calcium and magnesium and possibly, PUFAs. And so the lists were really comparable in length. And then the nutrients that were favorably high, there were actually way more nutrients that were favorably high in a vegan diet than they were in an omnivorous diet.
Yeah.
And so this, this claim that and it's even in the dietary guidelines for Americans, they say there's, multiple potential nutrient shortfalls for vegans, and they even listed some of the nutrients that the systematic review said are favorably higher in a vegan diet.
Yeah,
so
we reviewed it. We reviewed it. If people haven't watched episode 1, that's exactly what it is. 2 hours long, when you went through the whole document. So if anybody wants to learn a little bit more in a concise way, but also in a way that is clear, because I think you used such beautiful, easy language that it's it's really the layman's person can actually learn something. Because I think it's very important to actually speak in a way that is not medical when we talk into our audience, because not everybody knows all the terms, and we've done such a good job with that.
Yeah, and I just want to add that in that study, and it was 2021, it was a systematic review of 41 studies. The authors actually concluded, and I think that's one of the things I loved about the study, was they concluded that there are nutrient inadequacies across all dietary patterns. It didn't matter which one they looked at, but because plant-based diets are generally better for health and better for the environment, we need to come up with more public health strategies that facilitate the transition to a balanced plant-based diet with a more diverse range of plant foods through consumer education and food fortification and whatever we need to do to help people transition in that direction, because it's so much better for long-term health.
Wow.
And so we've got some really good evidence suggesting that the benefits of plant-based diets are really quite overwhelming.
I absolutely agree. Thank you. So just to inspire our audience, what are you eating today?
Oh, okay. I'm doing my usual breakfast, which happens to be this time kamut berries and barley and lentils with my chia pudding, and I have blueberries, blackberries, strawberries, and mango in it. A homemade dehydrated granola and some seed mix on top with soy milk. And then my lunch is always the same. I shouldn't say it's the same. It's always a little different, but it's always a giant salad with sprouts, every color of the rainbow of vegetables. I have two different types of radishes on it and some fun things. And then I usually have tofu cubes and some little cubes of butternut squash or something like that. I make a tahini hemp seed dressing, which I love, a squeeze of lemon or balsamic vinegar, and some seeds or avocado on top. I always want to make sure in my salads that there's a source of fat, because when you have some fat in your salad, it helps to ensure that you're going to maximize your absorption of all of the fat-soluble nutrients and phytochemicals that are present. And then for dinner tonight, I did stuffed portobello mushrooms, and I actually made them last night for my mom and I. She was away for a bit, and so I wanted to treat her when she got home. So I made some lovely stuffed mushrooms and then steamed vegetables. So that was that will be my dinner again this evening.
Sounds brilliant. Oh my goodness. Well, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I think people have probably gotten a lot of inspiration, and I love that you have the raw granola that you dehydrated, because I know with your book, Becoming Raw, you did mention, you learned, if anything you learned from that research is that we should all have a little bit more raw food in our diet, and it can come in any form that is fun,
Yes, and some of my favorite things, I love the raw dehydrated granola, but I love the raw crackers that you make with seeds and vegetables. Like I use about half seeds and half vegetables with lots of flax seeds. And then, I just do a range of vegetables, zucchini and butternut squash and peppers and kale and lots of onions. and just mix those two, and it makes the most amazing crackers. And then the other thing I absolutely love, which is in our one of our raw books, I think it might be the Raw Revolution diet book, but is these corn tortillas made with fresh corn from a cob, or it can be frozen corn, and yellow peppers. And I think we've got a little bit of golden flax in there. But anyway, they make a kind of a tortilla, which I fill with. I make a salad with avocado and black beans and mango, and it is just such a yummy meal.
Yes, sounds amazing. You're making me hungry and I need to have lunch. So I'm going to make my giant salad as well. Thank you so much for today. Thank you for coming. Don't worry that we got the days wrong. You are a busy lady, and I know the days sometimes, if I didn't have my diary, I wouldn't know when it's morning and night, even if there's light and outside, I'm like, oh my gosh, what time it is. It's incredible. It's like time is going faster and we are busy, but we really hope that everybody understands what a love project this is, that we're really trying to bring awareness and knowledge and sharing from the heart, because it's needed. And this is it's our life. It's not just our job. I think the nice, beautiful thing that brings people like us together is that we are passionate about it. I never feel like I'm working. I always feel like what I'm doing is part of me. And so I hope that it really comes through. And I think it does come through into our project here.
Thank you for your graciousness, Chantal. Yes, we are busy. We just received the final proofs for our Plant Powered Seniors book, which we have to get done in the next few days. And then I'm also preparing for a big conference and knee deep in getting my lectures ready. Yeah. I feel the same as you. It doesn't, as busy as we get, it's a passion project, and when we love what we do, it never really feels like work.
No. So thank you, Brenda, and we'll be back with everybody next month for a new episode, and we really hope that you're loving everything we shared so far. Please check the first episode where we have the dietary guidelines review. Second episode, we're talking about myth about cardiovascular health. This is so important because cardiovascular disease is one of the biggest killers, the first killer in the world. So it's something really to pay attention to. And then on the third episode, we had Dr. Nagra. So check that out for the seed oil. And we will have more and more to come with amazing speakers. And of course, we are here for you, your hosts, Chantal and Brenda. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.